So welcome to our Women in Screen podcast series. We're here speaking to women shaping the screen industries across development, production and storytelling. Today I'm joined by Susie Hunt, whose career spans documentary, script reading, development and large-scale television production. She's worked behind the scenes supporting executive producers on major series and has a big focus on identifying and championing emerging creative voices. Susie. Hi. I put on my radio voice. Susie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
No, it's really our pleasure. So I'm going to be sort of going through a few different thematic areas for the podcast. And I may have a couple of follow-up questions as we go, but let's see how the flow goes.
Absolutely, let's flow.
Wonderful. Okay, so just to start off with your career beginnings and what kicked you off on this wonderful screen pathway.
Yes.
So you studied English literature and film studies before moving into documentaries and script reading initially in your career. So what pulled you towards storytelling and visual storytelling as a career?
Well, I think, I was always a huge reader as a kid. You would rarely find me without a book in my hand as a kid. I wasn't hugely social. I'd spend a lot of time reading. And then I think it was probably theatre that was my first introduction to the idea of, you can actually perform this and people can see it and you can get their reaction as an audience for this. And that kind of shared experience. And so I think it started off in that space, and I did drama at school and I loved that, and I think I wanted to be an actor for a while because I'd go to theatre and they were the ones saying all these amazing lines and making everyone laugh and cry, and then I worked to actually know someone's writing the words they're saying. That's a cool thing to do. So for a while I wanted to be a writer, and then I was like, when someone's telling them where to stand, director, and I kind of went through all the different roles like that until I worked out that actually a producer is the one who gets everyone there in the first place. And I was always kind of seeking more and more power, I think was what it was. But
we'll get on to raise power later.
That power, exactly. Always looking for the kind of the next big boss. But yeah, so I kind of was very involved in theatre at school, really enjoyed that. And then went to Trinity, as you say, to study English. With also doing film studies as well, which was more, and we were kind of saying this earlier offline, more of kind of like doing history of art, but with films as the focus. So it was very academic, and it was more about kind of the history of film and kind of reading films through a feminist lens and the kind of psychoanalysis lens and things, and all of that kind of stuff was so interesting to me, but not hugely practical. And so I was always looking for ways to try and put what I was learning in the classroom into practice. And so I'd make lots of short films, and for I directed a few shorts while I was still a student. And then I think I worked out quite quickly that as fun as it was to be directing a film and to be the director of one, and it was more the kind of piecing it together. It was that initial shaping process and pulling together the money, like getting the crew involved, like getting everyone to buy in on a vision was the part that I found most compelling. Then when I was actually standing on set looking at a bunch of actors who look at me telling them what to do, I was like, actually this has kind of lost a bit of its appeal for me. I like that kind of big picture thinking and that kind of idea of having lots of different films on my slate, or lots of different stories to tell, and the flexibility that comes with being a producer, and you can do that. You can follow where your passions are quite broadly. So the kind of, that was my kind of uni experience. And then when I was at Trinity, I had the immense privilege of having the opportunity to go to LA for a year to UCLA, and I was studying there, and obviously their film department is absolutely world class, and I was able to learn from some kind of actual working executives in the business, and for the first time really was taught what a producer does. Because I think quite often here in the UK and in Europe more generally, you hear a lot about these amazing visionary directors and really kind of punchy writers who are writing these really cool stuff, but you don't often hear much about what producers do. And the idea of development, I remember I got a development internship when I was at UCLA for a couple of days a week, which for me was like the dream. I was like bussing down Sunset Boulevard and feeling like I was living in Hollywood, like working there, whatever. And
you were living.
Well, I was, but it was. I think I just watched La La Land as well, so I had like another day of song playing in my AirPods. But yeah, I didn't even know what development was until I got that internship. And the reason they hired me was I'd been working behind a bar, so I was good at making a cup of coffee, and I'd do what I was told. And through that, then kind of, I knew that was the path I wanted to take, working in development, production, and kind of that more producerial role rather than writer or director.
We've so many people who, I've been in the school for 9 years, we've so many people who come into the school and say, talk about the importance of knowing how to make a good cup of tea.
Oh god, yeah, honestly, that's one piece of advice. I mean, definitely know how to make a good cup of tea and what questions to ask, so you don't have to come back and be like, was it 1 sugar or 2? You don't want to be that person.
That's wonderful, and like what an amazing experience to go to UCLA. But good to have that combination right between the two.
100%, and just see how they do it out there. It's so different here, and just to see how many people you're actually up against. It's quite something.
Yeah. But it sort of girds the loins, right?
Oh yeah, it lights a fire under you. You just think, God, all these people here are so hungry. Yeah. I've got to be hungrier.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, absolutely. That sounds fantastic. Thank you so much for that. So some of your initial experience, and correct me if I'm wrong, I've just been crawling your
don't worry,
online, was in script reading.
Yes.
Which, it sounds like a really, really powerful training ground. And I suppose, what did this period in your life where you were a script reader sort of teach you about storytelling and also about writers, I suppose, as well? Because that really informed some of your later, when you started curating, right?
100%, yeah. I mean, definitely, I think if you want to learn what good writing is, I think that the best way to do that is by reading, 100%. And I think everyone should try and read. Everyone working in film and scripted film and TV should try and read as much as they possibly can. I mean, good scripts, bad scripts, and not just the Oscar winners, not just the ones that you've already seen, but ones that haven't been made, ones that maybe change drastically from draft to draft, because I think that's the only way you can really develop on the page a sense of taste as well. I mean, it's all well and good knowing what finished films you like, but if you can't spot what a good script looks like from the outset, then you're really going to struggle to work that out before something has kind of a full vision presented to you. So I worked, after doing the development internships in LA alongside my studies, I kind of, out of necessity to kind of finance my last year of uni, I ended up freelance script reading for a bit, and then carried that on while I was also assisting producers too, just to kind of keep a foot in that development space. And I mean, I read hundreds and hundreds of scripts. Some were brilliant, some were absolutely horrendous. But all throughout what I was able to then learn and hone is the idea of what is a good note, and how do people, not just what film do I want this to be, because I have a very subjective opinion as to what makes a good film, as does absolutely everyone, but what does that filmmaker want the script to be, and how can I help them with my questions and my comments, and kind of help them shape their story, as opposed to imposing my vision onto what's on the page. And that was a skill that I think it took me a good few years to hone. It took me a lot of quite tense conversations with people who responded negatively to some probably very poorly phrased notes. But you only learn by doing it, really. I think, it's all very well theorising about what good writing is, but at the end of the day, you'll only work out how you can shape it if you have a go.
So the red pen, no.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, even things like that, I mean, it's always, I think, this is such an industry of egos as well. I think there's a real art to being able to not persuade or delude, those are not the words I'm looking to use, but to suggest that an idea is the author's idea, and that's always the way that something will end up making it into the end, is if everyone gets on board with it, everyone can take ownership of that direction that a project takes.
Yeah, well, it's like drawing out the intention.
Yeah, exactly. Drawing out the intention, not ascribing ownership, and not making it an ego thing of like, well, that was my idea, why isn't my name associated with the script as well? Like, that's not your position as a development person or producer. In most cases, it's the job's to kind of help the vision of the writer that you're working with.
Yeah, to amplify and refine.
100%, yeah, and sharpen, and also be the one thinking cynically. Like, for example, I know this is a much bigger thing in the US writing circles than it is here, but just to think about the reading experience for someone as well. In terms of, if you're writing a comedy, you probably should have a joke on each page. If you're writing, and it's, maybe won't show up as being per page in the actual, broadcast, but you should make it so that when you're turning the page, you're going to get a joke in the next page. Or thriller, like, you want to keep them going from scene to scene if they have to turn the page to do so. it helps to have a bit of suspense between scene breaks.
It's sort of being cognizant of the developmental process.
100%, and who's reading it, and always being audience conscious. I mean, not just the people sitting in the cinema watching your finished film, but the reader who has to get through to get to the financier, to get to the money to actually make it. Yeah.
And now, not to put you on the spot, Susie, but if you could synthesize it into a sentence or two, when you were reading a script, actually, what got you really excited? What made you think, yes, I'm going to actually put effort into developing this because this has got legs?
Oh, I can give you one word: voice. Just voice. I mean, yeah, a real kind of signature. Because I think structure and plot, I think most people can do that if they've read enough and watched enough.
Yeah.
But having a clear perspective throughout and being confident in that is 100% something I'd say would make me want to read on and be excited by something.
Oh yeah, that's so interesting, because of course so much of teaching is that, and you have to learn the structural things, but that's formulaic, right? And when you've got hundreds of thousands of scripts coming in across the world to load to different, to production houses, actually voice is the differentiating factor.
100%. I mean, there are so many millions of scripts that never get made, and so many that get half written and not finished, and so many very talented writers out there, but only like 1% of those brilliant scripts actually get made, and the ones that do, I think, largely do because of the voice behind them.
Wonderful. Okay, great. I'm going to move on to a couple of questions on craft and craft and development and those kinds of things, if that's okay. So obviously we have millions of students listening to this podcast. So for students, I think development as a concept can feel a little bit mysterious. So what does a development executive actually do day to day? Just talk us through that briefly.
Well, I mean, big cliche to say, but no day is the same, obviously. And I think, no one person's experience of that role is the same either. I think, I could speak for other people who work in development have a very different experience of it to me, I'm sure. But a lot of it is reading. I mean, you do spend a lot of time reading scripts, and that could be scripts that are submissions that you've been sent by an agent or talent directly, and you're reading it to see if it's something that your company is interested in acquiring, and then writing notes on those scripts, because largely speaking, you receive so many when you're working at a production company that you need to have some kind of record as to what you sent and then why people liked it or why people didn't like it, and so you have it all on file. So a lot of that, a lot of reading new drafts of projects as they come in. Like if you've got something in active development, i.e. it's being funded, all the deals are signed, and we're working towards a green light, then it'll be reading new draft after new draft and seeing if the notes that we gave last time have been implemented or not, and if they haven't been, why, and if they're not working, then why is that? It's also, I mean, and this kind of isn't the case for everyone who's pure development, but definitely my experience of it was also thinking about casting and packaging projects too. So if we have a really compelling project that we're looking to acquire, maybe it would only really work if one of 5 directors who exist in the world currently was attached to it, because otherwise it's not going to get financed. Therefore, it's thinking about who are those directors, how can we get to them if we don't have an immediate personal connection, and sometimes agents can be quite slow to get back to people who they don't know. What would be the most interesting version of this film, and what would it look like if a different director was attached to it? Those kind of conversations too. And then of course, you've also got making director lists and cast lists for projects, and ideating about what the different combinations could be and what the most commercially viable one is, and whether everyone else is on board with that vision or not. So there's a lot of conversation, a lot of brainstorming, and
iterative as well.
So iterative. And there's also, the tricky thing is there's never one correct answer. So it's quite often done, it's not in a vacuum. You can't just say, oh, well, obviously we're going to have Leonardo DiCaprio star in this film, because obviously no one wants him in anything.
He's available.
Constantly doing really low budget indie projects too. But yeah, I mean, you have to kind of be realistic as well about, if you've got quite a new director, you're probably not going to get Leonardo DiCaprio, but if you've got a really experienced director, then maybe that's an option, and therefore how would that impact the look of the project and its budget?
Great. Sounds like great fun.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Honestly, anytime someone asks me, what I do, I mean, the best way to describe it is I live in kind of, my dream world as a kid. I get to live in the world of making up stories and talking about character and world building, and it's a lot of that. It's a lot of those things. I mean, obviously there's the boring admin side too, but I don't think anyone wants to hear about
but that makes you enjoy the creative stuff. And look, there's there can be a lot of doom and gloom out there. So I'm always trying to sort of we want to maintain an environment of joy actually within the creative space. It's really great to hear you say that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's someone said to me fairly recently, it's like, how lucky are we? I mean, how lucky are we? For so many reasons. I don't think people should use that as a reason not to pay people fairly in the screen industries, which is obviously a big problem. Because just because someone would do your job for free doesn't mean they should, or that you shouldn't be paid for it. But it is the kind of job where if you love story and you love kind of the technicalities of craft and bouncing ideas off people, development's a really good place to be. I mean, less so if you are more looking for that fast pace of production, because development also can be really hard. Can take forever. Can be heartbreaking because sure, sometimes it can take forever on a project, but sometimes when things do die or don't go right, that's really, really tricky. We just don't get there with a script. But yeah, I mean, that's also kind of partly why I've always kept a foot in production as well, because I think it is important to give yourself those wins and actually see the stuff that you're investing in get made and have that audience interaction. Yeah,
super. That's fascinating. Thank you. Just in terms of your personal experience as well, so obviously you are an award-winning short filmmaker. And actually, in Central Film School and in many film schools as well, actually, short film is our stock and trade. Yes. We're really passionate about it as a form. So it'd really be interesting to hear about what role you think short form plays in a creative's development. And in that format, specifically in short form format, what are you looking for if you're looking to develop a short form film? How does it differentiate from feature or TV, etc.?
Well, this is interesting talking about creative development, because I think it's a twofold service that short form provides, and I think it's that creative development in terms of the voice, which we were talking about earlier, and craft and the ability to execute. Something which is its own piece of art, stands alone, not a proof of concept, just is. I think that's really important. But from a development perspective or producer standpoint, when looking at the work of short filmmakers, the thing that always, I think, and I don't know if people would necessarily use this word, but I definitely would, is the idea of scale. Can it be scaled? If someone makes a brilliant short film, but it's almost entirely hinged on one particular device, or doesn't have that kind of signature style to it that necessarily would translate to a feature film, that's something I think people maybe fall short on when they're looking to make that step from shorts to features. I think it's really important to think, okay, I'm making this short film, but what does this say about my body of work? How does this fit into the narrative of who I am and where I'm going? Because I think people want a reason to get excited by short filmmakers and say yes to them and bring them to the next level because they've already done something and just needs to be repeated essentially in a longer way. But I think it kind of, if you're making like a horror short film, then a comedy short film, then a romance short film, what's your feature going to be? A horror romantic comedy? I mean,
love it
exactly. I mean, maybe that's it. But if you then come pitching a drama as your feature, then that's probably going to be quite a tricky narrative to sell to anyone who's going to invest in that project. So I think it's a creative and commercial sense that you need to approach it with, and that's something I definitely look for in the filmmakers I work with at the short level. When I'm kind of developing those relationships, is sure, like, you've got this great idea for a short, but is it a great idea for a short, or is it something that makes sense in the narrative of who you're going to be in a few years' time and where this will take you? What do you want from it? So it's so much work. You've got to know what you want.
And I think that's a really, really good approach actually, because it has to be it's a piece of art in and of itself, as you say, but it should be in a way a calling card.
100%.
And it should tell people who are reviewing it something about you as an artist.
Exactly. I mean, don't make it difficult for people. I mean, the people are already incredibly time poor decision makers. Don't let us kind of have to do mental gymnastics to decide what you'll be like as a feature film filmmaker. Make it easy. It's probably the best advice I'd give on that front, because there's just so many shorts out there and they don't make money.
They're not commercial.
No,
Generally speaking,
exactly.
there's a couple of there's a couple of organisations who are looking to commercialise them, but generally not. So they have to be leading on to something else.
100%. Yeah.
Cool. That's great. That's really good advice. At the other end of the scale, obviously, I've mentioned Rings of Power. You worked in some really, really major, huge studio productions as well.
Yes.
So what did those experiences teach you about telling story at scale? So I'm back to your words.
Gosh. Yeah, I mean, they taught me that, I mean, I think anyone who goes to a big, blockbuster or watches a TV show to the level of something like Rings of Power or Game of Thrones or one of those ones, you see all the credits and you think, gosh, there are so many people going to this. It's such a big team effort. And I think that was one of the obvious takeaways that I got from, from working on productions like that. But I think more than anything on a personal level, those jobs taught me about making decisions under pressure, and when you do have, the stakes do feel very high because you've got a lot of people waiting on answers on things, and things can go very wrong, particularly when it comes to health and safety and kind of money being spent, because the scale is just so huge. But also I think one of the most assuring things I took away from it is that actually, whether you're on a short film set in your nan's bedroom making a £3,000 passion project or working on something which has a massive budget, ultimately everyone's there because they love it. And the problems that are encountered are usually very, very similar. If a lens breaks on a massive set and a lens breaks on a short film set or indie production set, the questions had about how to mitigate that are largely the same. So it's all incredibly transferable. I think also it kind of taught me a degree of humility, which I think is really important as well, to kind of see what it looks like when you're working with people who are absolutely the top of their game, and having the opportunity to work with those people and just watch them work, I think is such an incredible education. And I'd encourage anyone who gets the opportunity to work on a big production like that, even if it's just temporarily or amazing opportunity. I mean, you get a front seat to watching some of the best in their game doing their very best work.
Yeah, so like passive mentoring.
100%. And also people are so willing to help as well. I mean, some of the biggest favours that I've got in kind of short film producing or kind of indie stuff have always been from people who work at that level, because they all want to pay it forward. I mean, so a really, really kind transport captain who I worked with previously, who runs kind of, cars and that kind of thing, has always been so incredibly helpful every time I've needed a Luton van. And that's something you should spend loads of money on, if you're working, in a short film scale, that would be like half your budget gone on transport. But if you've got someone who doesn't necessarily need that, just wants to help out, that's a connection you can make on jobs like that, which is invaluable in so many ways, particularly when you're starting out. I think for lots of our student films, 75% of the budget is transportation and F&B. I mean, it's all the boring unsexy stuff. It's all the unsexy stuff. It's so expensive, and if you can make the connections with people who can just get that stuff sorted for you, and that just really helps. Because
creativity is free.
Exactly. Well, creativity, exactly. Unfortunately.
But should always be charged for.
Exactly.
We have a very strong. Genuinely, we've got a really strong approach on that. We don't promote unpaid opportunities to our students because it further stratifies and sort of concretizes inequality within the creative industries. So it comes from your mindset, but you must be paid for it.
100%. So you can't pay rent and exposure.
Exactly.
100%. I completely agree with that. What I would say though, as a slight counter to that though, is I think anyone when they're starting out in terms of writing and directing feature level stuff, you do need to put in a bit of graft just to show you can do it. So otherwise, it's such a crowded marketplace, and it's so much money going into. I mean, you wouldn't give someone who'd never run a company before, but maybe kind of wanted to, a couple of million quid to
what?
Do so. And I think therefore you have to show that there's a repeatable system within what you do to make that a justifiable investment.
But that sort of feeds back into what you're talking about in terms of creating shorts. What I mean? So it's like that.
Exactly. It's that proving ground.
It's the proving ground thing as well within the work. So I think that totally makes sense. Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Any sort of I know this is like Sophie's Choice and you love all of your projects equally. But in terms of, you worked across shorts and you worked across obviously these big productions that we mentioned, but was there anyone that really stands out for you as being particularly impactful on you as a woman in screen?
Oh, as a woman in screen. Well, I think I had a really brilliant experience. I do think most of my most memorable experiences probably come from doing short films. And I'm hoping that more will come from doing features, and as in the process of building my feature slate. I mean, hoping that will be the case there too. But there was a brilliant short film I worked on a couple of years ago, which has had a few issues in post-production, unfortunately, which means it's not out yet, but it should be soon. I've done quite a few in between, but this one should be out soon, called Dirt. And it was a beautiful script, very, very personally written by a young mother, about the process of dealing with both a breakup and new single motherhood in one fell swoop. And we had a really, I think, a democratic approach to it's probably quite the wrong word, because we definitely had a chain of command, since the director was very much in helming the ship in terms of creativity. But because we were working with a 3-year-old child, and it was the real mother and real child that we were working with, which was, I mean, a logistical nightmare in and of itself. But because we were working with quite a delicate story and a delicate central cast member, we just had to completely throw the book out the window in terms of how we wanted to get performances and how we wanted to structure our days. And actually, at the end of the day, that was one of the happiest shoots I've worked on, in the sense that no one's needs weren't being met creatively, but also logistically, and we all just had such a good time making it. I mean, the things we did to try and get this little boy to kind of interact in the way we wanted to, but also the moments where we just left the camera rolling and let him do his own little thing, it was so interesting, and kind of went against everything I think that we're taught about the regimented nature of scheduling, and how everyone has to hit their mark at this time. It was much more improvisational way of filmmaking, and I really enjoyed that. And it also made me think a bit, optimistically about the future, when me and my producing partner kind of putting together longer form projects, as well as how can we make sets kind of friendlier places, because they can be really scary, particularly when you've got people shouting and high pressure, and maybe things aren't working out quite how you want them to. And I think it would, as a woman in film, make sets probably more accessible to people returning to work after maternity leave, or kind of working their way up in the more technical roles in particular, if there was a slight attitude adjustment in terms of how we're not saving lives, we're making movies. Let's have fun doing it, and let's respect everyone's feelings, and also let's not work insane hours, because that doesn't help anyone do their best work, I don't think.
Really, really sound advice. I'm just imagining a 3-year-old turning around to you and saying, "What's my motivation?"
Oh, I mean, honestly,
trying to get that shot.
In one scene, it was that he'd lost his toy truck. That was his motivation for that scene, as far as he was concerned.
but like it's real Mike Lee vibes, like a genuinely naturalistic performance. We talk about that so much, and what is the difference between screen acting and stage acting? You talk about naturalism and internalism and stuff like that, and actually creating an environment. That what a wonderful thing to see. That's it manifesting.
Absolutely. And living the film, and we all, I mean, literally in that short, because we didn't have security for our kit, I slept in the set every day, and it's called Dirt, and it's about a dirty house which then gets cleaned, and I slept on set with the kit. I mean, I was very much in that film. Method, exactly. But everyone else was there too, in the sense we all just were shooting in this house, which is all like a hot set, and we were all kind of having to navigate this kid, and making sure he was happy all the time, and that we were complying with the health and safety and everything else, and kind of child performance regs, but all having a really good time doing it. It was really fun.
Wonderful. That sounds, I can't wait to see it.
I'll send you a link.
Let us know. Okay, that's great. Thank you so much for that. Just now to talk a little bit about emerging voices, particularly, obviously we're in the business of facilitating emerging voices at Central Film School. That's what we're about. And also a little bit on industry navigation. You've touched on a couple of really interesting points when you've been talking about Dirt. So in terms of, obviously, by the nature of your experience and the kinds of project you work on, I presume that you come across a lot of emergent filmmakers, right?
Yes, many.
New entrants, whatever, desperately seeking budget, sort of young filmmakers. And you talked a bit about voice in terms of the writing, but if we sort of skew it a little bit to other practitioners within the field, what are the qualities that set early career filmmakers apart in your eyes? What are the things that you actually see in terms of somebody who wants to become a practitioner? That you're like, yes, I'm going to put you in a movie.
Interesting. I think it does differ slightly across disciplines, so I'll try and be broad as possible. But I think fundamentally reliability.
Yeah.
I think you want to have a team around you who's reliable and consistent. And that means the really basic stuff, just like turning up on time and replying to emails when they get sent to you and reading things before kind of coming back with an answer or that kind of thing. I think that's really important. And those are the people who then tend to get the jobs when the opportunities come knocking. But I also think, and this is again slightly more cynical, but I think it speaks to the nature of the beast, is momentum. I think momentum is massively underestimated when people are just starting out. I think and I define momentum as being the idea that you're going to make it, you know, despite what anyone else can offer you. People want to bet on a winning horse, and people, you know, again, it's cynical, but people will be more inclined to help someone who they think in the future can help them. Obviously, there's very selfish people out there who pay it forward, come what may, to anyone who asks, and I'd like to think I'm one of those people too. But generally speaking, momentum is something that I think you can't really put a value on, in the sense if you've got a really kind of strong pitch as to why whatever you're asking for from someone or whatever you're positioning yourself for makes sense in the narrative of your inevitable rising star, I think that's a really compelling reason to someone to buy in to you as a practitioner in whatever practice that is. So I think really kind of thinking about what that is and what are the buzzwords associated with you, what makes you stand out from everyone else, why is this the next step for you in your trajectory. All really important things to think about. And the work from that starts years before actually then it comes into fruition. And I think always be thinking about what that bio looks like. Again, it sounds really cynical, but it is, I think, probably quite a catch-all way to define how it is that you can make it look like you will go for its manifestation, I think, in its most base form.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It's kind of like a self-propulsion, but I suppose people are looking for, you know, why should we invest in you? And actually people invest in people.
100%.
Not necessarily an idea or a business model. Actually, they're in, you know, if you talk to investors outside outside the
in the real
industries.
world.
Yeah.
100%. I think there's such a tendency as well in the arts to prioritize artistry and use quite loose, vague definitions. I think it's quite easy, but ultimately the way things get made is because people buy into them quite literally, and there's a chain of events that have to happen for that to make sense as an investment for someone. It's a business. It is the show business for a reason, not show fun time. Like it's, I was trying to think of a better word for that. Show party.
Show party.
Show holiday. It is a business.
Show
and
halls,
I think, you know, I think, you know, quite a few people, I think, when they get into the arts have this idealized version of what it's going to be like, where everyone just like respects the art and that's it. But no, you've got to be able to pitch yourself within that and to make a case for you being an investment. For sure. And even at short film level, I mean, no one like invests in a short film to make a return. That doesn't happen. But people do invest in short films because they think a filmmaker might be going places and they want to have the opportunity to invest in their feature or say they were there from the start.
Early adopters.
Exactly. Exactly. It's all kind of, I guess, a bit of a switch, that more commercial mindset as well.
And just to delve into that a little bit, so like correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like you're saying that people have to have a pitch of themselves in a sense, and that has to be, so how, like, you know, is there a way that, like, you know, from your perspective or anything that you've witnessed where you've seen people actually craft that personal pitch or develop that in a meaningful way, or is it simply knowing, you know, having a plan for 10 years time? Like how does that actually manifest? Is that,
I mean, I think taking directors and writers at a feature level specifically, I think so often there's so much time and energy spent by that writer-director on working towards that first feature and what that first feature is. They're not thinking about feature 3 or feature 5. And I think that's quite a good example of where I think maybe people sometimes fall short of envisioning that. And I mean, as I said, as an example I used earlier, if you've made a horror comedy and a romance as your portfolio of films, I mean, where does that now fit into that? And I think it's a case of inevitability. I think one way people do this creatively, which I think, you know, does work, I do think that it shouldn't necessarily define a filmmaker, but is by outlining in their pitch what their unique perspective is. I mean, I love it when I get a script about a really niche area of like the UK or like a world I don't know, and this person has that perspective because they lived there and they, you know, and they ended up, you know, living there for 10 years and, you know, whatever, something like that. I think it's making those connections, which I don't think I'd necessarily turn down a script because the person hadn't lived in that world. But having that unique perspective through it, I think, really helps, and making it clear that they're the best person to tell that story. And from actors as well, I think it's, you know, I do think obviously casting directors also have, as an external factor, have this kind of influence in that process, because quite often they're the ones creating a narrative as to why a particular actor should be in a particular role. But it's thinking strategically about, okay, I've done a bit of this, I've done a bit of short film, I've done a bit of TV, now how about theatre? If I want to be doing more of those kind of grand roles, maybe I should be looking at doing some theatre in amongst this as well. And
credibility.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, exactly. Or kind of maybe I shouldn't necessarily accept every minor role that's sent my way. Maybe I should hold out for something which is a little bit more juicy.
Well, an actor friend said to me that the no's are more important than the yeses in terms of making those being intentional and actually how you're crafting your career pathway.
100%. If you want to be a leading man or woman, you know, take those roles when they come. I mean, obviously there's a bit of risk and there's a lot of privilege involved in that if you can afford to say no to things if you're still getting your career started. But I mean, I'd say it applies to anyone is don't be afraid to hold out and be strategic about it. You know, you're not, no one's doing you a favour by offering you these jobs. You're still very much in charge. Yeah,
and know your value.
Know your value.
And have that sort of like slightly longitudinal perspective on, is this moving me in the direction that I want to head?
Exactly. And what does that look like after? What's the next thing? Not just what's right in front of you right now.
Cool. Great. So just to talk a little bit about your personal experience as well. So now you're sort of 10 years into your career, you've had loads and loads of success, you started obviously at 9 years of age. Doogie Howser of the screen industries.
I am 10 years old,
And, but I suppose it'd be, you know, now that you're sort of 10 years in-ish, what, you talked a little bit earlier on about like how you're sort of living your dream, but actually, from when you were a child, you know, that you're doing it now, which is so inspiring and wonderful to hear. But actually, are there aspects of the industry that have surprised you once you entered it? You know, when appearance became reality.
Oh yeah, I mean, frequently. I think you get desensitized to it all quite quickly after a while. I think, you know, when I was on Rings of Power, I think the sight of an orc walking past holding a Starbucks cup was a bit of a jar, and oh wow, actually, you know, I work in the movies. It's so fun. I think the thing that I it's a personal thing I've been grappling with recently, that I've found interesting too is it. It's not surprising to me per se, but I think there's a lot of shyness about defining who we are too early on. And I think often, as a woman in particular, I do think that I kind of, throughout my 20s, I had this intention of being a sponge and learning as much as possible and working jobs that weren't necessarily exactly what I wanted to do, but I'd learned something from and I could take that. And I'm really glad I did do that. I do think that something I've been not disappointed by, because I think it's really cool to witness and for me to try and emulate more now, is how many people are so audacious that they can just walk into a room and be like, I am this thing, and you know, and that's it. And they're very good at that pitch. You know, they're very good at I am a director, even though they've only done one film on their phone. But I mean, it's true, they are a director, and that's who they're presenting, and that's what they're selling. I think it's taken me a while to get comfortable with the idea of calling myself a producer, or even now even though I have produced and I'm working on my own kind of long form slate as well, which some things are kind of picking up some steam, I still have this like block in my throat about saying I'm a producer, which is so ridiculous. And I look at some people I know who, there's a massive generalisation, so please forgive me, but largely are men, or just they just have this audacity I wish I had more of. And I look to those people in my life and I think, oh, why aren't I selling myself like this? And I think that's something that I think surprised me in the sense of I didn't quite realise how many doors open for you the moment you start actually declaring to the world what you are, rather than being apologetic about it. And I think that's a really interesting thing I've had to overcome, and I didn't think it would, so I always thought I was very confident. But I think if you admire the people you work with on a level beyond just professionally, because you feel this emotional connection to their work and you want to follow in their footsteps, I think it's quite easy sometimes to try and hide your light under a bushel when actually no, we should be loud and proud about it. And I think that's something I'm kind of working towards now.
It's sort of the British affliction.
I know it is. I know. And I thought I'd kind of go into LA for a bit, cured me of it, but it's still there. I need to get over that.
Yeah, and do you I suppose, would you think that that's a manifestation of socially constructed, positions for different genders, etc. in society?
Yeah, I think so. I do think there's a little bit of that. I also just think that sometimes I need to get over myself, and I think I can say that for other people too, and just go for it, because you only get one life, and and sitting there apologising for existence isn't going to help anyone, or you, most importantly. Like, you're not the main character. It's not just going to be handed to you on a plate. No one's going to turn around to you one day and say, okay, now you're a director. Now you're an actor. Exactly. Like indoctrinated. That's just not how it works. I mean, you're going to fight for it.
Excellent. Okay, great. So I'm talking about fighting. I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of resilience.
Gosh,
and that's fine. No. Has there been a really, that you're willing to talk about, I should say, has there been a really tough moment that turned out to be a teachable moment for you?
A tough moment that turned out to be a teachable moment.
That you're willing to divulge?
I'm willing to divulge. No, that's where it gets tricky. I have a little think about this for a second. Okay. So I think... So I was very lucky kind of when I was working freelance in production, assisting producers, in the sense my jobs went back to back. I basically had 2 very long jobs back to back, which is basically unheard of when you're working in freelance physical production. It's way more kind of compressed than that usually. And as I finished my contract on the second of the 2, it was the middle of the strikes. It was the middle of the writer strikes and the actor strikes, and therefore there was just no work at all, particularly in production. And I had a real moment of kind of crisis whereby I did that whole kind of classic freelancer panicky thing, being like, oh my god, where's the next paycheck coming? We must apply to everything, blah blah blah. And I think, and that was I'd define as being the tough moment. But I think how I then reset my thinking slightly really helped, and I think next time I'd approach that stress with a lot more calmness and kind of strategy.
Take a beat
and think, but also where it was teachable, I guess, is that I then did, after a month of flapping around and not really knowing what I wanted to do, what I took from it was actually I do have value. I've done a lot. I would be an asset to a team, and it really made me think about what I want to do next. And that thing was to move in house to work in development, and it worked. And it literally, as soon as I'd actually stopped flapping, and as soon as I'd stopped thinking that I was going to lose the roof over my head. I mean, and obviously all these things with the massive caveat of sometimes you do have to be practical about this stuff, and you do have to be sensible. You do have to be prepared, as I did, kind of to work a job that isn't in the industry, just to temporarily keep yourself fed and watered, which I think is another really important thing to say, is that you've got to leave your ego at the door slightly. It is a roller coaster.
And play the long game.
Exactly. And at the moment I'd actually kind of calmed down a little bit and had to think about it, and was happily kind of financed by working behind a bar or whatever, then the thing I wanted kind of did manifest, and I was able to then really strategically look at what that next step was, and that's when I moved in house to my current company, Hang Time. And it all worked out really well. And I would say that kind of something that I now, next time that happens, if it does, I will definitely remember that moment, take a step back and be a bit more clear-headed about it, perhaps.
But again, like a great creation of your career, because to have those 2 sides of the coin experience as well, from the freelancer side and the in-house, like that must be invaluable.
Gosh. I mean, it's my ultimate goal to be a one-stop shop, in the sense I think lots of people do silo themselves very early on, and I know lots of people who work pure development who have never been on set, or I know, which is wild to me, or who've no interest in doing short films, which is completely fine. I mean, lots of people can work their way up that way too. But at the end of the day, because I have done that, and because I've also worked in physical production, and I've got this development kind of brain as well, I'd like to think that most problems, if they did arise, I'd at least know what I didn't know, or at least know who I could call in that situation, or have seen something like it before. Whereas I think lots of people who pick one track and stick to it don't always necessarily have that ability to think in a bit more three-dimensional way, I guess.
Yeah, definitely, and a contextualized vision of the pathway forward.
100%, and also it gives yourself more options. I mean, if you do then need to dive into a more of a development-focused job for a bit, or into a production-focused job for a bit, you have that fluidity, and you always will learn from it, and it'll always kind of be useful experience to have and bring you contacts you didn't have before. I think it's important to keep not silo yourself too early on. Be a sponge.
Yeah, and I think careers will be portfolio.
Yeah.
That's the future of work. Like that's, and we, and again, that can feel like a challenge, but
100%.
Actually, you have to take it on as an opportunity because it is what it is.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, and it's also, I mean, speaking of women in screen, I mean, that's something that someone said to me recently, which I thought was really, really poignant, is the idea that we all have to have like one kind of mounting career trajectory over the course of a working lifetime. And then it looks like getting promotion after promotion, stepping up in the pay grades, and having one main employer and then switching to another employer. And that kind of way of doing things is very rooted in, without the kind of the context of, if you have kids, what happens?
Exactly.
If the hours you work are unsustainable, and if your partner isn't willing to support, in that way, or maybe you don't have a partner. All those things, and the idea of a multifaceted income stream, and the idea of kind of getting savvy and diversifying your kind of career portfolio, or the things you can dip into and out of, and having multiple kind of options open to you, really suit women particularly, just based on some very kind of long-standing prejudices and contexts that women typically have to reckon with. And I definitely think that can be applied to the screen industries. Although it'd be nice to see more multi-hyphenates getting recognition here in the UK, because I think that's still something that's a bit of a, not a no-no, but definitely something that isn't given the credibility that perhaps it is in the States at the moment, I'd say.
Yeah, we're a bit behind track on
it's
that one.
What do they mean they think they can do it all? That's outrageous. Get back in your box.
Back in your box, exactly.
Oh. How dare they?
Yeah. Well, we'll be part of the fight to change that.
Yes, please do.
And maybe this is sort of a segue from what you just said, but is there something about working in the screen industries that people don't talk about enough that they should be talking about, and our students should be aware of?
Oh, that's a wonderful question.
Thank you.
It's wonderful because I can't think of an answer instantly. Oh, yes. Okay, yes. Actually, yes. Okay. So something I'd say that has definitely... I was quite fortunate, and I received this piece of advice quite early on, but I think I've only really begun to reap its rewards now. But I do say it to anyone who will listen. And I think quite often when you're kind of an aspiring or are a writer-director, and you're kind of looking for that next big break as an emerging talent, there's a lot of tendency to go for the big hitters and to be like, oh, Steven Spielberg, here's the USB with my finished feature film on it, but please can you watch it, and whatever. I think and sometimes once in a blue moon that can work, and that's wonderful, and those people obviously have the power to open a lot of doors for you, and that's great. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take and all that. But the importance of networking amongst your level cannot be overestimated, because ultimately, if you succeed, it'll benefit your friends, and if your friends succeed, it'll benefit you. That's kind of the base level of it. But also, you want to be in this career for the long haul, and Steven Spielberg, God love him, he's not going to be around forever. And that's not a long-term mentorship. And also, he's got millions of people asking for his time as well.
Of course.
But it's the people you meet at your level, or maybe just like one level above, who were where you were really recently. They're the people who can really open doors for you, and they're the people who will be your collaborators. And I think your network that you meet now at film school, or if you're just getting out kind of making short films with your mates and whatever, those are the people who will carry you through on days when you need that support, and they're the people who will open doors for you when they also succeed in their careers as well.
Yeah, I pass around a lot of unsolicited advice to anyone, whether they listen or not, kind of thing. But one of the cliches is you get work from your network. We talk about that so much in the school.
100%, and that network isn't necessarily the most important person in the room. It can be. Yeah, exactly. It can come from absolutely anywhere, and my favourite things that have happened to me have always come from someone who I didn't necessarily expect to get anything from, and that's when I think the real magic happens, because it's not transactional. Yeah. It's just you're in the right place at the right time. That's what it means. Yeah. Wonderful.
Okay. My final question.
The $1 million question.
Do you have $1 million?
I wish.
Speed line, she's no, something a little bit lighter to finish up with. So just as we wrap up, so is there a screen story you think CFS students should watch right now? And what should they be paying attention to in it?
Screen story.
So film, TV show, whatever you want. I'm going as broad as possible. But something that you're like, watch this now, and this is the thing that you should take from it. This is the thing that you should be focusing on.
Oh, I wish I could think of something more obscure than perhaps the one that's automatically come to mind. I mean, I am currently absolutely obsessed with Industry. Amazing. Yeah. And I'm sure lots of your students are watching it avidly as I am. But I think that is an example of a TV show which, I mean, first of all, those writers, Conrad and Mickey Down, came from absolutely nowhere, and they were able to apply really specialist knowledge they had of another area into drama, and I think that is a really good way of. It's a really good example of, first of all, from a writing perspective, how to convey stakes through jargon. Like, even if you've no background in investment banking, which I think most people watching it don't have, you can still work out exactly what's important, exactly who's who, like who's the idiot in the room, who's the smart person, like what the stakes are. You can figure that out without, Succession does a very similar thing as well. It's very, very cleverly written. Also from a performance level, I mean, honestly, the fact that show hasn't quite blown up yet, but all its cast members are such rising stars, and they're getting the work because people are watching it and noticing how brilliant those performances are. I mean, the subtleties, and also the kind of the archetypes made more real with nuance, and that's really cleverly done in terms of how the performances are. I think that would be my, honestly, anyone who listens, I'm banging on about Industry to them at the moment, so I sound like a broken record, and any of my friends who listen to this will be like, God, she's on again. But Industry again. But I truly think it is one of the best things on TV right now, and I'd highly recommend anyone who hasn't watched it to start. And season 1, you have to kind of not get through, it's still good TV, but it's seasons 2, 3 and 4 which are just sensational.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Susie, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. And tune in next week for our next podcast. Over and out.